Good morning again, my lords, ladies, admirals, generals, ladies and gentlemen. I know there's another panel after this, but I think all roads have led to this one, because every single panel over yesterday and including this morning has talked about people. They've themed around technology or the future, and in each one we've come back to the importance of people. So having a panel dedicated to the theme of, we've called it future sail, but it could be future seafarer, future mariner, future marine, but it's about people, and it's an important topic. In the programme that you've got, you'll see the full biographies of our panellists today, but very quickly, Rear Admiral Jude Terry is the Director of People and Training in the Royal Navy. Baroness Anderson is a working peer in the House of Lords and just happens to be on my advisory board, so thank you for everything you do. Chris Keenan is with the City of Glasgow College and heads up the education and training wing that covers the nautical side. And Nynne Scheuer is a Director of People and Culture. Interesting that the word culture comes into this with MAERSK. So a wide spectrum of experience and perspectives I hope we'll get from the panel. And of course, what we do want is to get some feedback and some questions from the audience. So let's dive straight into it. So I'd like to say first to Baroness Ruth. Society is obviously changing and evolving. So how do you see the changes? How are they being manifested? How are they affecting people today, employers, employees generally, perhaps the armed forces and the Navy in particular? But how do you see it from your perspective, and what should we do for the future?
Well, that's a really easy question. We almost had a Zoom moment. I was muted. I should also, before we start, good morning everybody, but I should, before we start, say, although I'm a shadow defence minister, I'm now meant to pretend to have equal affection for all of our forces, but I am an honorary captain in the Royal Navy, so I think you captured me first. And it's brilliant to see so many of my fellow honorees here in uniform looking fab. Look, the world has changed beyond all recognition since 2010. And the question for all of us now at this point is, have we done enough to prepare ourselves for the world in front of us? What does that look like in terms of people? And what do we need to do in terms of next steps to make sure that we are fighting fit? I would argue, and I don't need, with this audience, especially with the skills in this audience and the expertise, to outline the challenges, but from AI and new tech, changing warfare that we're seeing day by day in new domains. Our new domains in terms of the impact of space, Ukraine, Middle East, Indo-Pac, everything suggests that we now need a solid foundation and that the idea of pivoting to each new area is just no longer viable. Then that always brings us back to people. We heard yesterday from First about the impact of our new ships and our new platforms and what those will look like with fewer people. But that brings us to the question of what skills those people are going to need. And if we're talking about fewer people, what does that mean in terms of the general public and their appreciation of defence and engagement? So for me, that means that we need to start thinking very differently at each part of this conversation. We need to be talking not just about our military, but our wider defence family. We need to ensure that we're considering what skills look like and what people look like on every set. And I know we're going to talk about business, we're going to talk about our military in all domains, in all forces, as well as education, but we also need to think about the civil service and people in contractors and what uniforms they wear, or not wear rather, and what skills we need them to have, as the world changes and we need flexible skills very, very quickly. I think in Q&A you may ask me about what a Labour vision looks like. I'm happy to address that. But I think this is one area, and we've seen mostly over this conference, this is one area where this is not about party politics. This is about making sure that whatever the government, whatever the flavour of government going forward is, that we are able to defend our country and defend our strategic interests around the world. That requires a non-party political approach, that requires a national approach, and all of your help. So the Labour Party, subject to the next election and the good people of the electorate, we'll hope to build on what we've got and make sure that we're fit for the next generation. I just want to touch on one point that I think is an opportunity in terms of where the world's changing. We're about to roll out AUKUS. AUKUS is going to be an incredibly exciting opportunity for us, and we tend to talk about it in terms of platforms and Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, but actually AUKUS, when we're talking about people, could be a template for how we expand and embed our partnerships. So we talk about NATO and how important NATO is. We talk about AUKUS. Actually, what we're talking about, if we're sensitive about how we're going to roll out multinational platforms, is how we can make sure that those skills are spread across all nations and that we're embedding and upskilling at the same time. Everything's going to be about upskilling for the rest of my lifetime, and we have to be about as imaginative as we could possibly be in order to deliver that.
Thank you very much. Admiral Jude, is that the picture you see? How's the Navy responding to these changes, the things we've heard over the last couple of days? We hear a lot about tech. What do the people fit in?
Yeah, thanks very much. So, interestingly, Kevin asked us to pose a question to ourselves, and I think it's probably a bit like Rob Johnson's question that he asks himself every time he goes through the tubes into MOD. And my question that I posed myself, which was, what do we need to do to ensure we actually have a Navy in 2040? Because we have absolutely heard how critical it is and how crucial it is. We've heard about the tech and the innovation. We've heard about platforms, because we all love a good number of platforms. But as one of my more educated colleagues than me said earlier, you can project power from the sea, but not if you don't have anybody on board any of the platforms, or to interpret the data, or to analyse the data, or to work out how you're going to operate. So I think the first point is building on what we've heard in this conference. And my observation would be to everybody who's online and everybody who's in this room, we're kind of preaching to the converted, right? I don't think there's anyone in this room or online who doesn't believe that we're a maritime nation. I come from a 9x5 island that's not very far from France, and it came as a bit of a surprise over Christmas, apparently, when the ferries hadn't been able to travel because of the weather, that there was no food on the shelves in the supermarket, linking into James's point about the advert that we nearly had 10 years ago. Is it actually too scary, or is it where we need to be? And so my observation would be, we need the UK to believe it needs a Navy. That's what I ask all of you to do. It's one of the things we're doing with our teams. We're spending more time in places perhaps that haven't really understood about the Navy. I spend a lot of time talking about my godchildren, but one godchild, when you say to him, the data is not in the cloud, my friend, it is under the water, that comes with a really different perspective. And so for me, I could quote all the same numbers that James did. We joined at the same time, 97, 98, 99. But ultimately, the UK needs to understand why it is vulnerable. The UK needs to understand why it needs a Navy. And we need our people, everybody, to believe in needing that Navy. We then need to sell an exciting career. And we need to sell it in a way that has people telling stories. I've listened to some great stories here over the last couple of days. People recruit people. Telling them what it's like, really what it's like, the fun bits, the hard work, the teamwork. We have over 30,000 cadets in the Royal Navy, across all from CCF to Sea Cadets to Voluntary Cadet Corps. Those people believe in what it is we do. They like the idea of a uniform. I particularly like it. I don't have to choose what I wear every day. That's a good thing. They are really wedded to who we are, what we do, and the adventure and the opportunities we provide. Why can't we do as well getting that story to other people? One of the reasons is we're not very good at talking about our social mobility. We're not very good at talking about where we come from. And lots of us think it's normal. When I speak to all my friends who are not in the Navy, they don't think it's normal. Believe me, being in a building like Lancaster House, being able to have a dinner in a place such as Lancaster House, that is not normal, and we need to share our brilliant adventures and where we've been. But I would observe, and recruiting has been in the news a lot, there are people who want to join for the sense of adventure. They want to join for Ruth's part of the family. They want to be part of a team, but we have to explain the why. There's lots said about millennials, there's lots said about the new generation, Alpha, or whatever we're going to call them. they absolutely believe, and we need to sell them the why. That's our job, that's everybody in this room's job, but more importantly, it's everybody beyond this room's job. And we need to relate to the fact that it isn't just a service, it is the sixth environment. The Navy offers great opportunities in all environments. We're the only service that does. We need to be better at telling that story. There are people who want to join. We have a great opportunity. We also need to be aware, though, that people might not stay. Gone are the days of I want to join and I want to spend 30 years in service. So what we need to offer is zigzag careers, which the Second Sea Lord coined and is now in the Haythornthwaite provision. What does that mean? It means understanding that experience in the Navy is good, in the reserves is good, in the civil service is good. Go and work in industry. Tell us about it. Equally, industry, come and work with us and tell us where we're getting it wrong. I spoke to Vice Admiral Tom at length last night about requirements, and my observation would be one of the things is we don't get industry in at the early stage and we over-engineer. I need an engineer to tell me what we can deliver, not actually what my vision, perhaps, might be. So I think that is what I see. I think society is changing. We can go into lots of, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about where we really are today in terms of people, but we have enough people who want to join. We need to be better at telling our story.
Thanks, Jude. That's really interesting, and because Rob Johnson said, within half an hour ago, we're going to have a 1,000-ship navy, but it just won't have any people on the ships. So, how do we bridge that gap going from now to then? Nynne, in MAERSK, you have a company. You have more ships than the Royal Navy. You employ more people than the Royal Navy. You have fewer people at sea than the Royal Navy does. So you're already, we talk about having minimally crewed vessels, but you do that day in, day out with your company. So how do you see the environment changing? How has MAERSK responded? What lessons do you have for the sector more broadly, but in particular for military navies? How do you do it?
Thank you, Kevin, for the question. If I could first just start out by expressing my appreciation and gratitude on behalf of MAERSK towards the Royal Navy. I think the work and the efforts of the Royal Navy make a difference every day for the flow of goods, medicine, food worldwide, but also makes a tangible and very important difference for our seafarers. So thank you for that. And then back to the question, yes, indeed. So in MAERSK, we employ 100,000 people approximately. 13,000 of these are seafarers. But we are actually an end-to-end logistics company. So apart from our 13,000 seafarers, we have terminals, we have warehouses, and we really offer end-to-end solutions to our customers. If you look at the support structure we have in place on shore for our vessels, we have approximately 600 people at shore and then 13,000 seafarers. But returning to the topic that we're discussing here about looking at the skills of the future, I wanted to share just a few of the points that we're working on and addressing some of the challenges that we are seeing. So first of all, we are in the midst of a cultural transformation. So a couple of years back in 2021, we could see that there was a culture on board our vessels which was not in line with what we wanted and also what we want for the future seafarers. And we have a steadfast commitment to work on that because it is the right thing to do, but also because whether it's Generation Z or whatever we call them in the future, have different expectations and requirements towards their employers and the work and colleagues that they're surrounded by. So this is something that we are putting a lot of resources into, training our top 2,500 leaders in ensuring that we create the psychological safety needed on board and that really create that speak up culture, ensuring that everyone feels included and feels heard, because we believe that's the as you said initially, right? People are our most important asset in fleet. MAERSK, in our industry as a whole, right? So we need to make sure that we address the challenges that are there and also the change that is required. Another topic which we are focused on is ensuring that our seafarers have the skills that we need for the future. And so I think this goes both ways. I think future generations, we see that already now, have higher demands for their work to be meaningful and to have a strong purpose. But also we have more expectations towards them. So I'll give you just an example. In MAERSK, we, across our different business units, we use technology to ensure that we can accelerate the impact and the efficiency of the business. And for our seafarers, for instance, that is, we have a digital route planning tool, which will provide the captain with the most optimal route based on fuel consumption, based on whether there's legislation, marine protected areas, and so on in place that they can use. It's not just a reporting tool. It's meant as a best practice tool where you can take inspiration from other vessels and from our engineers ashore. We expect our seafarers to proactively use that, and this is just one example. But we also expect them to, I think the time where if you were super skilled individual or professional, that won't cut it, right? You have to be a good leader, you have to be a role model, you have to be able to create that culture on board that we are looking for both at sea and ashore. But it's a two-way street in ensuring that we have the skills, but also that we offer to our future seafarers what they deserve. I think part of this element is ensuring the diversity and inclusion that I mentioned before. And here we are very focused on increasing the number of female seafarers that we have. And in some markets, that has not been existing. And this has meant that we have had to build the market ourselves. But we will do that, and we are doing that. And in India, we have built it. As one example, we've built a university together with some very good local partners to ensure that we do get the female cadets and ratings in that we want to deploy in the future, to ensure that we are not limiting ourselves to part of the workforce, but ensure that we actually have access to all capabilities and all skills that we need in the future.
Nynne, thank you. We were talking at dinner last night, and I can't remember the word you had in Danish for the sense of values and worth. Could you remind me of that word?
Yes, I'll do that. So it's, I think it's called nyttig virksomhed, and I'll just explain the meaning of it. So it is basically, it means, if you translate it directly, useful company. What it means is being a company that contributes positively to the societies that we're part of. It's based on this belief and this purpose that our company was built, and it is what guides us in the decisions that we make as a business also today. And as we also discussed yesterday, Kevin, we see a very strong alignment between being a profitable company, delivering value to our shareholders, while at the same time being a responsible company, which is preparing for the future ahead and as a responsible part.
Thank you. I find it fascinating. Those of us who have spent most of all of our working lives in the public sector, we'll probably look at the private sector and think it's all about the bottom line, it's all about money, but it's not necessarily the case. And what you've talked about motivation, about purpose and meaning, being linked to profitability, I think is fascinating. I think the cultural transformation thing is affecting all of us, and I think we need to understand that. You also said yesterday that most of the people who work with you have been there for a long time, so your retention figures are very, very positive. So recruitment is one part of the jigsaw. Retention is important as well, and I think it's something that we all need to understand. Chris, do you recognise all this? Is this what you see? So you are now at the beginning of the journey for seafarers, sailors, mariners of the future, and training and educating them. What works? What doesn't work? What's the way ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'll apologise for my Glaswegian accent at the very start of this. and thank you for having me today. It's great. So yes, what drives me and then what drives education? I'll also apologise, having been in the armed forces, but I've been in the REME and the army side of things, but I'm going to say that helped me form my vision of education. I hated school. I left to take up an apprenticeship with Rolls-Royce at an early stage just to get away from school. Although I did retain a good apprenticeship, but I learned very early on that education was in a rote fashion. There was the wagging of the finger of a teacher, there was the scolding of the student, and it wasn't a great learning environment back in 1990. Okay, that's when it was. You can work out age then. So where are we now? We work in what we call active, blended and connected learning. It's not one thing. So how can I explain that? And I hate the word I'm about to use, pedagogy. It doesn't sound good in a Glaswegian accent. Okay, and I apologise for that. But what does it mean, learning and teaching? To be active, blended and connected, students will be co-creators of their own learning, challenged with real-life problems and solutions. They'll be doing that alongside industry specialists, whether it be Royal Navy, whether it be BAE Systems, whoever it may be. They'll be doing it with practitioners, they'll be doing it with experts in their field. Students will develop the skills to help them attain, achieve and progress to a positive destination. And that's what we talk about in education, a positive destination. Because not everybody has the chance to become an apprentice with Rolls-Royce or to get into the Royal Navy. Like me, they come from a deprived background, and sometimes we need to help them to get to that stage. That's the first part of what I do as an educator. Their experience will reshape their future and create pathways to a new career. That's a statement. So as I've seen today and yesterday, as has been highlighted throughout this conference, we're in a world of ongoing change. Our young people aren't the same as what I was like back in 1990. I was more outgoing, more connected, played football out in the streets, and talked to people. Young people don't do that these days. They talk in a different way, and they talk through social media and other avenues, and so we need to reach out in that particular way as well, and we need to help that. Our students will therefore be entering highly competitive employment markets and different employment markets, in particular in the Royal Navy. You'll have jobs at this moment in time you haven't even thought about that will come about because of the technology and because of what you'll be doing. Cyber warfare as much as actual direct conflict. Education is the key to achieving competency though. And for me, what I do is I'm a bridge between the Royal Navy or any industry and the young person who's taken up into that industry. I've got to advocate for both, and I've also got to make sure that both connect well. And also, Nynne, talking about inclusion, respect to gender, race, ethnicity, learning difficulties, and making sure that people who are neurodivergent can find their superpower and be in industry and not be excluded because they don't immediately meet the standards that people think they should. I'll give you an example, and I'm looking at a load of seafarers and some people who haven't been. Put your hand up if you were a navigation or a deck officer in the Royal Navy or in the Merchant Navy. Could somebody? I'm seeing a few. So I took up as the Dean of Nautical and STEM as an engineer. And we're going through, you may have heard of it, cadet modernisation with the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency at this moment in time. And it's a large process. It's about how do we form the seafarers of the future and the shipbuilders and others of the future. And one of the first questions I asked was, what about doing away with sextants? Why don't we get rid of sextants? Right? By gum, as an engineer asking about it was 40 deck officers in the faculty. What do you think they said? What would you say, sir? Yes? I'm not particularly bothered whether you do or don't. It's not really my decision. It's your decision. The point is, why do we educate on something that somebody may not need? And that's what the education aspect is. It's bringing it back to what is needed rather than what we've done historically. Okay? And that's the part that I play in that bridge. We train cadets. We're working with the Royal Navy and Marine Engineering. We train seafarers. for the Merchant Navy. We train shipbuilders, so we're working with BAE Systems at this moment in time in that aspect. We also have built environment teams who create the infrastructure around about that put all of that in place. So we're very aligned to industry, but I need to make sure I align the students to that industry, and that's the bridge that education is, and that's what we do on a daily basis. I can leave it at that.
Thanks, Russ. That was, I'm going to respond on behalf of all deck officers. I'm going to say, so our adversaries can turn off GPS or degrade it. They can't turn off the stars and the sun. So, you know, keep the sextant.
Can I also add, though, that when they do that and they turn off the GPS, they may have already hacked your autonomous ship and shut down the engine, so you're not going anywhere anyway.
It's not the, as the Second Sea Lord of Fleet Commander, the First Sea Lord, no, it's not the first time I've been told I'm not going anywhere. So, right, we've got about half an hour to go. I'd really like to open this to questions from the audience now.